Good afternoon and welcome to the 33rd voyage of Nationalist Review here on America First Media, coming to you from an undisclosed location on the beautiful and humid eastern coast of the United States. Thankfully out of the path of those horrific winter storms in the Northeast, but we are here in the flesh, coming to you from the undisclosed location, like I said, hotel room with a nice view of the beautiful sunny and 80-degree weather outside. We have a different show for you today. This is the first iteration of the show that is going to be solo. I have no guest today, just myself, doing a little quick episode, a little bit shorter than the usual version. No break in the middle this time, just a straight power through, a power hour here on Nationalist Review. We will be back in the studio with a guest host next week. So things will be returning to normal next week. Last week, no show. I was highly sick. I was bedridden sick last week. Flu going around. I don't know. Bioterrorism. I don't know what it was. But I had a devastating illness. But back this week on the road. So again, back to normal next week. We have some news, though, this week. This has been a frustrating process, in my opinion, keeping up with all of these different stories going on, just because you get frustrated by the lack of movement. I often get frustrated by the lack of movement in a positive direction. And to keep coming back week after week to talk about these stories like DACA, for example, this is how Obamacare was during the early months of the Trump administration, where you just see no movement on these stories. It does get kind of frustrating and grating. And this week was particularly triggering with all of the discussion about gun control and gun regulation. And I did the broadcast last week with Spectre of Third Rail, where we dug into the gun issue in a little bit more in depth, and we can include a link to that here in the show description. But the gun control issue was of course hot and heavy in the news this week. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about that because really nothing's going to get done on gun control. And the work that does get done on gun control is going to be coming from the private sector. That's what we saw happening this week. I don't think that Trump's comments on guns, we'll start there with the Trump comments on guns about, of course, you've seen them by now. We're in this meeting with Democratic legislators and some Republican legislators. And Mike Pence, Trump stated that he prefers, in terms of gun legislation, he prefers to take the guns first and then do due process later. And this caused a lot of consternation on the right. I saw a lot of people, especially on Gab, highly blackpilled that Trump was going to become the gun grabber in chief. He was going to move forward with restrictive gun bans, if not gun confiscation. And I think a lot of that concern and a lot of that rage was premature. And of course, we know that this is what Trump does by now. Trump will come out on a controversial issue, whether it's immigration, gun regulation. This is the second, very clear and public time we've seen this now with Trump, where he'll come out and he'll say something seemingly making a large concession to the left, much to the ire and frustration of many on the right and many on his base. And then, as it turns out, when the rubber hits the road and when policy actually has to be made, Trump doesn't do anything about it. Trump doesn't act on that comment that he makes to seemingly placate the left. And this appears to be what happened on guns, because the night after he made his gun control, gun grab comments, he had dinner with the NRA, and then the NRA chief, Wayne LaPierre, or a representative for Wayne LaPierre, came out and said that there is no gun control in the works, that there's going to be no new federal gun control, and Trump is very interested in protecting the Second Amendment. So, but two things can be true at once, right? And we talked about this on Third Rail, and we've talked about this on other shows in the past, and I understand. Right, I understand people on both sides, right? I understand the people who are black-pilled and say that when Trump comes out and makes these comments, he means it, and he wants to do the gun regulation. He wants to do the gun grab. I don't think that's accurate, but I mean that's an understandable philosophy. I think it's wrong. However, I also can understand and disagree with the people who say this is brilliant 4D political chess. This is brilliant mastery, and I love that Trump is doing this because it crushes the left and it totally demoralizes them, and Trump gets everything he wants. I think this strategy is beneficial in the short term, but dangerous in the long term. I think that in the short term, by coming out and saying, I'm interested in gun control, look, the best gun control, what Trump can do is he can placate the left, and he can cause them to simmer down and redirect their fire in different directions. And that's good. And the same thing with DACA, right? When Trump comes out and says that he really wants a deal on DACA and he wants to protect the Dreamers and that Democrats are not getting anything done on DACA, he is able to seize control of the narrative and flip the blame for inaction back onto the left. So it's good in the short term. It's beneficial politically in the short term for President Trump. However, in the long term, I think what this does is it has the effect of splitting the base, and it has the effect of gaslighting the base into believing things that are not true. And I can give an example of this. So, for example, when Trump comes out on DACA and he says that we are going to give a deal on DACA, we're going to give the left a deal on DACA, we're going to protect these Dreamers, we need to protect these Dreamers, et cetera, et cetera. When Trump does that, there are a lot of people out there who are more MAGA-peed types who like Trump and support Trump regardless of what he's going to do on policy. I mean, there are only a few things that would break their support for him, and they're not really invested in the specifics of the policy more generally. And these people will see Trump saying we need to give a deal on DACA to these people. We need to do a deal for DACA. They'll see that and then they'll believe it. They'll see it and they will believe Trump when he comes out and says, yeah, DACA is a Republican issue, for example. And so then what you have is you have a group of individuals, a group of people who should be on the right, who should be fighting against a deal for DACA, should be fighting against amnesty. These people will be sort of hoodwinked into believing that, yes, I am fighting for the right wing. I am fighting for making America great again by trying to give illegals a deal to stay here. And that separates them from the more ideologically motivated section of the base that doesn't want the deal, that recognizes a deal on DACA means a demographic replacement, that recognizes a deal on DACA means Texas going blue by 2032. And I don't see the long-term benefit to splitting the base like that. I think you're much better off, and Trump would be much better off, by unifying the base, especially ahead of these very contentious 2018 midterms, where he's going to need all of the midterm victories, all of the smaller legislative victories that he can get, when the Democrats are going to be making a very concerted push to flip several of these swing seats in swing states, districts that, for example, voted for Hillary Clinton or voted Trump by only a very soft margin in the 2016 election, but have a Republican representative. Those are going to be targeted districts for Democrats, and Trump is going to need to hold as many of those as possible if he wants to maintain control of the House or the Senate. Now, of course, that is not an endorsement of the GOP or the GOP establishment. It just goes to illustrate that we need the bodies, right? You need the bodies to get any sort of legislative agenda passed. To get any sort of legislative agenda passed, whether it's infrastructure or even something like the RAISE Act or even a defense bill. And trust me, no fans of defense bills here on the show, but just to get things done in Congress, you need GOP warm bodies, and Trump can't afford to lose too many of those. So presenting a unified message for the base, unifying the base right now in 2018 would be the smart conventional political play. But again, Trump is playing for the short-term victory, which is his strategy and his prerogative. But it certainly doesn't inspire a lot of confidence from people, right? And we can all see this. All of us who are political observers can see this and see evidence of this. When Trump says something to this effect, something overly conciliatory, we know what it does to other people, other people on our side, other people in our movement. Many of them become very concerned, very intent on blackpilling. And we shouldn't listen to the blackpillers, right? We should not listen to the people who are constantly presenting the doom and gloom scenario. But Trump also, at the same time, should not be giving oxygen, should not be giving legs to those theories. It doesn't seem very politically prudent. Anyways, the story of this week that the media was running with, the narrative and meme in the media this week was the idea that the Trump administration is in free fall. The Trump administration is falling apart. We saw this. I was in the airport a couple days ago and glanced up at CNN. And of course, the chyron on the bottom of the screen was something like, or what is it? Chyron is the one that runs on the bottom, right? No, that's a news feed. I don't know. Whatever it is, the caption that CNN had for their show was something to the effect of Trump in disarray, White House in disarray. They constantly put forward this meme that John Kelly is on the brink of resigning, and every week we hear another story about how John Kelly is just getting ready to pack his bags and head out the door of the White House. And every week it turns out not to be true. Imagine that, the media lying. But that is the narrative the media ran with this week. And of course we know it's not true. Of course we know the White House is not falling apart. Like Hope Hicks resigned, okay? Hope Hicks, who, by the way, was dating what's the guy's name? The guy who allegedly beat his wife, Dan something. I'm spacing on his name. But Hope Hicks, who was a longtime Trump confidant, resigned this past week. And her resignation is being used as the key piece of evidence, right? Hope Hicks is gone, so the White House is falling apart. It's very easy to replace a communications director. Like this can be done. And there are dozens of talented and qualified individuals out there who could easily take over the role of being in charge of White House communications. Hey, Trump, I'm over here only a couple miles from Mar-a-Lago, man. Call me up. Let's do an interview. I'm a college graduate now. But this is obviously a minor story in the grand scheme of things, Hope Hicks resigning. However, there is a kernel of truth to the idea that the Trump administration is not firing on all cylinders, that they're being held sort of on their back foot a little bit more than I think they would like to, and definitely on their back foot more than we would like them to be. They're not taking the advantages that are being presented to them and running with them. The Trump administration is failing to make hay while the sun shines, as the saying goes. And when we look at the Trump presidency so far, over this past year, more than a year now, a year and a couple months, the biggest failures have been on the federal law enforcement front in terms of legislative agenda. I think the GOP tax plan was a victory for Trump. Obviously, immigration is still stalled, but that is still an ongoing story. We can't write that off as a failure yet. But what we can write off as a failure is the Justice Department, is Jeff Sessions. The nation's top Justice Department official, of course, is none other than former Senator Jeff Sessions. And I had high hopes for Jeff Sessions going into his term as Attorney General. I think a lot of us did. A lot of us expected really great things from Jeff Sessions because he had been a sort of a firebrand down there in Alabama. But that's not what we got. Jeff Sessions has been largely a disaster from the start. The recusal, for example, one of the major failures was the recusal from the Russia investigation, which led, as we know, to the appointment of Robert Mueller at the hand of Rod Rosenstein. And that was very odd. I think Sessions announced that during his confirmation hearings that he would recuse himself from the Russia investigation. I think he made that play. I believe that's true. We'll have to fact check that in post-production here, but I believe that it is true. Or it happened very early in the administration where Sessions announced his recusal. And look what we have. We have the beautiful and intrepid Robert Mueller as the result of Sessions' decision. And that's not where the failure ended, right? That would be, if that was the only failure, you could, make an excuse or write it off. But it is not. It is far from the only failure from Jeff Sessions. Even on the heels of the Nunes memo and breaking FISA scandal, which is now been confirmed by this Adam Schiff memo, Sessions remains asleep at the switch. There is no push from Jeff Sessions or the Justice Department to investigate and dig in to the FISA scandal. This is particularly maddening, right? Because this FISA scandal is the wedge, right? This is the foot in the door to investigate the Clintons, to investigate the Obamas. The door's been cracked open. And all Sessions would have to do is stick his boot in there, put his foot in there, and this could be broken wide open. This would be bigger than Watergate. Because, there's actually a lot more wrongdoing going on here than there was in Watergate. And yet Sessions refuses to act. Sessions issues directives about enforcing marijuana policy, but refuses to act on the FISA scandal, which is undoubtedly a higher priority for the nation. And it's getting to the point now where even Republican congressional leaders are taking note of this and are coming down hard on it. People who are Trump confidants, Trump allies, people like Matt Gaetz from Florida. And this is from Breitbart here. Friday, on Fox News Channel's Hannity, Representative Matt Gaetz of Florida told fill-in host Jeanine Pirro that if AG Sessions declines to appoint a second special counsel to investigate wrongdoing within his Department of Justice, he should be removed from that post. According to Gaetz, an IG report would be insufficient, given the report doesn't necessarily mean charges would be brought by the Justice Department against wrongdoers. If Sessions does not appoint a second special counsel, then we need a new attorney general, Judge, he said. Because you're right, even if we learn about more horrifying things from the IG, we can't actually prosecute somebody for those things because we would need somebody to be able to bring that case. So what Gaetz is lobbying for here is for Sessions to appoint a second special counsel and have this special counsel investigate the allegations brought forward in the Nunes memo and confirmed in the Schiff memo, the FISA spying scandal, effectively. And, we can only hope that Sessions will act on this and that Sessions will bring forward the second special counsel and will appoint the second special counsel. Because if he doesn't, there's the time is running out for Sessions to justify his position. The Justice Department should be the weapon that the Trump administration is leaning on the most at this point, but they're being rendered totally ineffective by Jeff Sessions, and this is why Trump has publicly criticized Sessions, because he's not acting on any of this information, any of these opportunities, these launching boards, these springboards for action. Sessions refuses to jump. So, yeah, if he doesn't bring forward a second special counsel, I agree with Matt Gaetz. It's time for Sessions to go. Another story about a different Jeff, this being, of course, Jeff Flake from Arizona, said on Friday that he would not rule out a 2020 challenge to President Trump, while predicting that the president, quote, will have a challenge from someone in the Republican Party. So Jeff Sessions, who can't even run and defend his own seat in Arizona, he's not running because he would lose, and we all know that. An outspoken critic of Trump who's not running for re-election told CNN's David Axelrod in an interview that while he is not planning to run as an independent, he, quote, wouldn't swear it off. So, I mean, if the GOP establishment tries to do this and they try to run like a Mitt Romney type or a Jeff Flake type, obviously they're not going to run Flake. I think that would actually be a good thing. I think that would actually be a very, very good thing. Unless, I mean, if it was a primary challenge, right? If it was a primary challenge, that would be good because it would give Trump the opportunity to thoroughly crush the GOP establishment for a second time. Like the guy who gets beat up and then and demolished and then comes back asking for more. The GOP establishment, they got their stuff kicked in pretty good in 2016, and if they want to become the glutton for punishment and get thoroughly BTFO yet again in 2020, then Godspeed, bring it on. I encourage them to come and do so. The concern would be if they ran the 2020 challenger, like an Evan McMullen type situation again, and they siphon votes away from Trump in the general election. That would be cause for concern because that might be enough. There may be enough absolute cucks out there who would vote for Jeff Flake in Wisconsin or something. Enough people who do that would then allow the unified Democrat Party, Democrat candidate to come through and just take the election in sort of a fluke. But I don't foresee this being an issue. I foresee this being a great opportunity. And the way Flake is presenting it, where he says, I do think the president will have a challenge from the Republican Party. I think there should be, Flake says. He also says, I also think there will be an independent challenge, particularly if the Democrats insist on putting up someone from the far left of the party. So Flake is envisioning a centrist, sort of like an Emmanuel Macron type situation in the U.S., where a more centrist candidate runs and wins. But that's just not how our country is going to work. Not how our electoral system is set up. And I don't think that's going to be happening with any success, with any degree of success. But look, the cucks want to strike back. Godspeed to them. Let them come back and get slapped down yet again. Now we have a couple of stories relating to Europe, good old Europa. Relating to good old Europa. This one on Russian interference, real Russian collusion hours, fam. The House Committee on Science, Space, and Technology released a report on Thursday. This article is from Breitbart, by the way, detailing how Russia has been using social media platforms to disrupt our domestic energy markets and influence domestic energy policies. So they want to talk about Russian collusion. Look, I don't particularly care about these things. Let's be completely clear. I don't care about Russia using social media, right? Russian companies using social media to try to influence Americans. I mean, I would prefer that it doesn't happen, but we haven't seen enough evidence yet of this collusion actually being large or significant enough yet for it to cause concern. Okay, and so until we see more evidence of malice or of actual effect, happening from these so-called Russian collusion bot farms or whatever they want to call them, until we see more evidence of these things actually having an impact, I'm not too troubled. But this report is a 21-page report, includes Russian posts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, some with photographs and slogans. The committee began investigating Russian attempts to influence U.S. energy markets in the summer of 2017, when Chairman Lamar Smith wrote to the Secretary of the Treasury regarding Russia's intricate money laundering scheme. Russian-sponsored agents funneled money to the U.S. environmental organizations in an attempt to portray energy companies in a negative way and disrupt domestic energy markets. Effectively, what these Russians are alleged to have done is put money towards environmentalist, anti-oil drilling, anti-fracking causes and organizations and NGOs to discredit or disrupt American energy markets. Essentially, convincing Americans not to allow more energy exploration in the U.S., right? Because Russia, and the reason Russia has a vested interest in that is Russia is one of the world's largest oil exporters, and they don't want competition. So if they can convince Americans not to allow competition to take place coming from America, then Russia stands to benefit. Venezuela stands to benefit. OPEC stands to benefit. All of these other these other oil exporting countries stand to benefit. So that's why they'd be doing this. That's why there's a financial incentive for them to do this. Upon discovering that Russia may have exploited American social media platforms to accomplish its disruptive objectives, the committee broadened the scope of its investigation, the report outlines. On September 26, 2017, the committee requested data from Facebook and Twitter as part of this expanded investigation. The documents social media companies provided to the committee confirm Russia's influence peddling, according to the report. So if the Democrats really want to hang their hat, if the left really wants to hang their hat on Russian Facebook ads and Twitter ads and Twitter storms as dangerous evidence of collusion that's impeachment worthy, like many leftists are saying, then if that's the standard of evidence they want, they're going to be in for a world of hurt, because the Russians and other foreign interests meddle in our social media all the time for a variety of different causes. In fact, much of the Russian so-called social media meddling that the left is using as evidence of Trump collusion is Russian social media meddling to promote things like Black Lives Matter. They were buying ads for Black Lives Matter groups and stuff. It's not like they're funding the right wing or funding nationalism in America. They're donating money to, or not donating, but they're funding trolling from all sides. So if that's the standard of evidence they want to use, hey, go for it. It's going to end up negatively for them. And our final story of today is a story from Italy. The Italian elections are coming up very closely. They're coming up very soon. And the center-right coalition that consists of former conservative Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi and Lega Nord, or I guess Lega now is what they're called, Matteo Salvini, and then two smaller parties, they are poised for victory in Italy. They are the anti-migrant coalition. They do not want more mass migration. They want to employ some degree of Euroscepticism. I know Salvini has talked about leaving the Eurozone and restoring Italian currency. So obviously not a friend of the globalists. And this is, again, articles from Breitbart here. The center-right coalition consists of the former Prime Minister Silvio Berlusconi, populist Lega Party led by Matteo Salvini, and two smaller parties embracing national conservatism and Christian democracy. The coalition has been clear that it is against mass migration, with Salvini and Berlusconi both promising that they will deport hundreds of thousands of illegal migrants within the span of the next 5 years if they form a government. And this is the interesting part here. While Berlusconi is the leader of his party, due to a prior conviction, he is unable to assume office as prime minister if his party prevails over the other coalition partners in the vote share. If the Lega, which is only a few percentage points behind, gets more votes, then Salvini will assume the office. And that would be huge. That would be that would be highly triggering for the international globalists and the European-style socialists if Matteo Salvini were to become Italian prime minister. He is somebody who is known and respected in some of the more further right circles in Europe. And just think back to the chimp out that occurred in the media when Sebastian Kurz became prime minister of Austria. Salvini becoming PM would be a whole new level of outrage and shock being imagined by the left. So good news there from Italy. Now, of course, if Berlusconi's party wins, Berlusconi is of Forza Italia. If they win, then someone else will become PM, but Salvini will undoubtedly receive a seat in power and become part of that government. And Liga Nord will become part of that government. And this is just further evidence of Europe's rightward shift, of Europe and Europeans moving further and further right as they are exposed to more and more diversity. This election is going to be a large bellwether. The Swedish election will be another large bellwether. We have, of course, Sverige Demokratis, Sweden Democrats up in Sweden. Far from perfect, but they are ostensibly the anti-migrant party, to the best of my knowledge. And in Germany, we have AfD now pulling into second place. AfD is now the second most popular party in Germany, despite all of the fracturing and incompetence that we've seen from AfD leadership and conversion to Islam too. Despite all of that, they're still the second most powerful party, or they will be the second most powerful party outside of CDU-CSU coalition here going forward in Germany, as the left in Germany is totally discredited and destroyed. Europe is moving further right. Europeans are moving more further right, and they are increasingly concerned and cautious about the dangers presented by diversity and mass migration. And we will continue to see results like this as the situation deteriorates on the European continent. And of course, like I mentioned earlier, Salvini has vowed to see Italy leave the euro currency, which would allow the Italian government to bail out Italian banks under stress due to over 150 billion euros in bad loans and a potential looming financial crisis. The globalists are not going to be happy about that one, folks. Well, that's all we got for this week. We'll be back with a regular show, a regular 2-hour program next week with another guest. Of course, we're coming to you live, not live, coming to you almost live from the road here. I brought my audio interface, got the trusty M-Track with me, the handheld Behringer mic. I've been holding it. I didn't bring a mic stand. I've been holding it for the entire show. But we'll be back with a regular show next week. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your support. We do appreciate you. AmFirstMedia.com. Check it out for content, written content. A lot of great articles going up there. See you guys all next week. Talk to you later.